Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lee Mei Goh, and I am the Director for Strategic Partnerships and Development at AmCham Singapore. This event is held in partnership with LimLoges&Masters as part of their Future Ready series. The topic for today is recovery from COVID-19. Where do we begin? For today's session, Chatham House rules will apply. We will also be taking questions on the topic at hand, but there will not be a verbal Q&A segment. Instead, please put in your questions in the Q&A box in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and not via the chat function. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce the moderator for today's discussion, Lilia Lim. Lilia is the Managing Director and Principal Founder of LimLoges&Masters. Lilia has been leading C-suite searches across Asia Pacific for more than 20 years, having previously worked with Korn Ferry International in its global industrial and consumer practices, and most recently at Kincannon & Reed as Managing Partner Asia Pacific and board member. Lilia was previously with British Petroleum and large conglomerates before her career in executive search. Let me please turn the time over to Lilia, who will introduce today's speakers. Lilia, please.
Thank you, AmCham Singapore, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning to some of you who are dialing in from Europe today. Welcome to the second installation of the Future Ready series by LimLoges&Masters. Today, we will be talking about recovery, fingers crossed. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong of Singapore mentioned in his annual Labor Day speech that significant structural changes to our economy are likely. Some industries will be disrupted permanently. Companies will have to change their business models to survive. Some jobs will simply disappear. And workers in these industries will have to reskill themselves to take up jobs in new sectors. The count for COVID-19 infected cases is now 3.6 million globally, and the virus has hit 210 countries worldwide. The WEO, along with IMF, have reported on 6 April that the global economy could shrink by 3% in 2020. But is there light at the end of the tunnel? I'd like now to introduce our panelists, and I'd like to now share screens with some of you, with most of you. All right, here we go. Timothy Wong is the regional head for DBS Group Research for Asia. He manages a team of 100 researchers across 6 offices in Asia. The DBS research team has ranked overall 5th position in Asian research according to the Asia Money Broker polls in 2017. And Tim has served in many committees with the MES and SG Exchange Securities. He has been conferred the title of Fellow of the Institute of Banking and Finance for Financial Markets in 2014. We also welcome Malik Ali. Malik is a seasoned corporate professional and an entrepreneur with early stints at Allen & Overy, BCG, and Yahoo, and more recently as founder of the successful BFM 89.9 radio in Malaysia. He has since 2019 entered the fintech industry with newly minted FI Life that seeks to disrupt traditional distribution of life insurance products. Malik is a lawyer by training and an alum of the Harvard Business School. We also have with us a technologist and entrepreneur, Lim Yao Boon. Yao Boon heads the disruption management practice in LimLoges&Masters. He has more than 25 years of experience in leading marketing and strategy with SAP, IBM, and Motorola across Asia Pacific. He also co-founded several startups from 1993 to 2018 and serves as an adjunct lecturer in SIM, Singapore Institute of Management. He specializes in design thinking, business alignment, and innovation strategies. Boon holds several degrees and was trained in design thinking at Hasso-Plattner Institute School of Design Thinking in Germany, University of Potsdam. So I'd like to turn this off, stop sharing, and let's look to our panelists for some advice. What are your thoughts for the Asian economy in view of COVID-19? And how long do you think the downturn will last? Shall we start with Tim? Tim, would you like to unmute yourself?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very happy to be on this panel this afternoon. So in terms of the Asian economies, our sense is that a lot of it really depends on how the pandemic situation progresses. Our base case scenario is that we're looking at sort of a U-shaped pattern where the economy remains depressed going into the third quarter, and then we start to see signs of recovery in the fourth quarter. Now, this assumes that we see a peak in terms of the whole pandemic situation globally in the next 1 to 2 months, and that essentially things come under control. So that's, I would say, our base case scenario. The risk is that we get a second wave of infections, especially in some of the economies or countries that they've all badly affected. And I think if that happens, then it will probably mean that the situation will remain quite depressed through the end of the year.
Yes.
The one bright spot is we are seeing Asian economies, large Asian economies like China, for example, are starting to show fairly strong signs of returning back to some semblance of normalcy. And I think that's the basis on which we are not as pessimistic, So I think that's kind of how we see things panning out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm in Hong Kong right now, and I do see certain glimmers of hope. Malik, what are your views? And you're based in Singapore.
Yeah, so I guess my business is in Malaysia, but although I'm actually living in Singapore, yes, I think the difference between these and other crises that I've seen, even we talk about the 2007, 2008 GFC and the 1997 Asian financial crisis, is that with this one, you can draw a line in one sense. You can draw a line in 18 months' time, right? Where you have vaccines and rollout of vaccines and so on. So it is a health pandemic. It's to me, there's in a way there is a certain amount of comfort in knowing that in 18 months' time, we ought to be able to sort of get out of this, right? I think in the two crises before this that I've experienced personally and at both times as an entrepreneur, it was much more unpredictable. You don't know when the end was. You just had to you live by news day by day. Here, I'm a bit more, funny enough, I feel more, as an entrepreneur, I feel more secure in a way, knowing that there's a baseline on this one. That's from my reading of, my reading of what Bill Gates writes in for his foundation in terms of vaccines and in terms of medicine, etc. So I think in that sense, I feel there is a time frame, but we just have to survive that time frame. That's the tough part.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think SARS has taught us a lot in Asia. Boon, could we have your views?
Thank you very much, Lydia. I think IMF has predicted Asia growth to stall at 0% this year. It's actually the worst in 60 years. I think it's going to be worse than the global financial crisis that we experienced in 2007, 2009 period. So it's uncertain. And we are also sure that it will be severe in our region. I think in terms of growth, there's a lot of dependency, like what Tim has mentioned earlier, right? A lot depend on how the whole pandemic pan out. But countries that are dependent on tourism, like Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, it's going to be a tough time for them to recover. And good thing that we have China to show the way at the moment. But as far as recovery is concerned, with the global network, global connection that we see right now, that will also affect us in Asia. So we think that it's going to be quite a long economic winter for some of us, and some even call it a mini ice age. But any recovery will unlikely happen, significant recovery only happen in the next 6 months. So assuming there's no second major spike in the spread for countries that are reopening, I think we'll be looking at something happening in 2021. And, but the contagion effect will be more pronounced in the coming months. It's just, it's more than an economic fracture at the moment. We just need to brace ourselves for at least the next 18 months, like what Malik said, and then be ready to survive the marathon or the mini ice age.
Yes. Yes, global connectivity makes us all vulnerable, doesn't it? I totally agree with you. Let's take a moment to do a quick poll with our audience today. Please pick one answer for the first two questions and multiple answers for the last two questions. And the questions are, where will companies be in the next 6 to 12 months? Second question is, what will happen to companies if situations worsen? And number 3 would be, which industry will recover first? This is the one where you can pick multiple choices. And the last will be, which industry will recover last? And again, please feel free to pick multiple choices for the last two questions. We're going to run this for 30 seconds and please respond as soon as you can. Thank you. Once everyone has more or less completed, barring panelists, of course, the chamber will help flash that onto our screen so that we are all able to see the results of what we've voted. It shouldn't take too long now. I believe most of us have responded. How are we doing, Limei? Are we more or less able to share that? Share the results?
The numbers are still going up. Maybe we give it maybe we give it another 20, 30 seconds, and then I'll go ahead and flash the results.
All right. No, that's good to hear. I would like to know that there is an engaged crowd out there. Thank you. So again, everyone, 4 questions, very quick ones. Where will companies be in the next 6 to 12 months? What will happen if companies if situations worsen? Which industry will recover first in your opinion? And which industry will recover last in your opinion? Okay, the results have come in. I think for question 1, it looks like we're all in agreement, we'll survive beyond the next 12 months. We do have the second largest respondent group is voting is thriving right now and will continue to thrive in the next 18 months. So Malik, you know, your 18-month time frame will be very valid. Question 2, I think majority have gone for will survive beyond the next 12 months, even if situations worsen. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And who do we have? Which sectors have you chosen? So in this question 3, which industry sector will recover first? 72% of you voted healthcare, 66% voted IT and telco, and then behind that would be consumer staples. Which industry will recover last? We're looking at 56% responding to consumer discretionary. And oh, it's tied with real estate. Oh, well, that's good to hear. That's really good to hear. So panelists, what are your thoughts on these sample poll results? I mean, which sectors do you think will recover faster? Malik, perhaps you'd like to, since you've given us this 18-month time frame, perhaps you'd like to respond first.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, yeah, I'm on the sidelines. I'm an investor as well, and I see this. I see things like the things which industry will recover first. I don't think certain industries actually are back at their levels in terms, at least in terms of their stock prices, right? We're talking about the software as a service companies, the Microsoft Teams, the Zooms of the world are even beyond their numbers. I'm a user of Adobe. I'm an investor in Adobe. Investor also in Salesforce. All these numbers are actually quite, these companies are very, very robust. I think where I just had a phone call today, we just interviewed a CEO, my radio team interviewed a CEO of the oil and gas sector and of a public company in Malaysia, and that's really tough. They're having it really tough going. They're having a lot of conversations with their bankers and so on. So I think the oil and gas industry, I completely agree when you say energy here. particularly this branch of energy, oil and gas, is going to be really, really difficult. Not just in terms of, they had a double whammy of OPEC and stuff, but also OPEC disagreements, and but also the double whammy of this sort of what you said just now about, if you think that the world growth is going to be -4% this year, there's going to be a big impact, whiplash impact on oil prices. So I think that's to me the most I agree with the poll here about energy. So I can point to the kind of the either ends of it. So I think the worst, I agree, energy, oil sector, and the best probably IT. And I think and of course, I guess the question about healthcare also, of course, has always been there. It's just like we can't access healthcare right now. Unless you have COVID-19, right? But I think that will bounce back too.
Yeah. What do you think, Tim? Which economy do you think? Do you agree with the polls?
Yeah. So actually, what's interesting is actually there's some industries that are actually benefiting. So we've seen, for example, the consumer staples guys, supermarkets have had blowout quarters, right, in terms of earnings. Some of them are even giving bonuses to the employees because they've had to work so hard. So it's interesting that there's some industries that are actually benefiting. Consumer staples is one. I would say certainly, certain parts of the tech sector are not missing a beat. So clearly some sectors are actually have benefited from this. The second thing I'd like to point out is actually there's some industries that appear to be doing okay. But actually there could be a second derivative impact. So an example would be finance, right? Actually finance, in terms of transactional volumes, first quarter has been really good. And most, particularly the finance company has put in digital infrastructure, they're not seeing a drop. I think where the concern has to do with how long this slump is going to last and whether it results in some of their own customers being severely impacted. So for example, if this if a global travel lockdown lasted beyond a year, which is conceivable, that even though life may recover in country, but people just can't travel, it could start to affect hotel owners and other people further downstream, and those will come back to bite the financial sector in terms of bad assets. The last thing I would point out, and just allude to a point Malik rose, actually oil and gas is in a class of its own, right? In addition to falling demand, that actually just the nature in which oil prices have fallen, combination of there was a lot of supply coming on from shale and other things, and then now demand has basically completely shut down. There's a shock effect for oil and gas. So I think that's one area where obviously we have to be quite worried about as being one of the things that could really drag things down, and with knock-on impact to other parts of the economy.
No, absolutely, yes. Boon, which sectors do you think will recover faster?
I think the recovery is really dependent on the shape that Tim just mentioned, right? Tim said it's a U shape. Everybody hope there's going to be V. We hope there's not an L. They're going to tank for a long time. U is likely, but if it's a W, which is possible, the double dip is going to be worrisome, right? Because second dip is going to be worse than the first dip. So we don't know. I think second dip will happen either because the pandemic had another outbreak or the economy feel the ramification effect. Yeah, like what Tim said, tourism, hospitality, business travel will be the slowest to recover. And those associated sectors that we know, airlines, hotels, will definitely take a hit. But I think before I speak a bit more, because it's linked to decline in some will help others to gain some momentum and opportunity as well, right? So I think decline in the travel sector actually beyond the oil and gas issue where we saw the drop in demand for fuel. According to GE, people that I spoke to, discrete manufacturing, there's a huge aerospace part manufacturers in Asia, all right? In Korea, in China, Taiwan, Singapore, and they're going to see a decline as well. And all this is going to have a ramification effect. And billion-dollar projects, airport projects like Changi T5, the Torrent airports that China trying to build in the next 15 years, all these will be disrupted. And the truth is that they will affect real estate, construction, and eventually the finance sector. Yeah, I think But this change also lead to the growth in the new norms, right? We call it like virtual meetings, work from home, home-based learning, e-commerce. And I think sectors, I mean, coming from the technology side, there are already sectors, ICT sectors that are already gaining, like what Tim said, sectors that drive the adoption of all these new norm, like telco, 5G related businesses will definitely go up. And also businesses that support all these online businesses, home delivery, e-payment, logistic, warehousing, last mile delivery, last mile hubs, cloud kitchen. I expect all this to pick up as well. And I think companies will see, I mean, industry will also see more disruptors coming along the way because new norms will have new opportunities, but also less job availability for those that are being retrenched, right? So while the big boys are fighting out the COVID-19 fire, we should see a real group of disruptors coming in. Another thing I want to point out is that to what Tim said earlier, I think I think there will be emergence of a healthier earth focus, all right? So sectors supporting cleaner environment will probably grow faster as well, like electric vehicles, energy efficient program.
Yes. Well, Greta Thunberg will be very happy to hear that. And if we can kick it off from Asia, why not? I was quite pleased to hear that real estate might be one of the sectors that everybody agrees will recover last. And that's because I'm in Hong Kong and real estate here is just completely beyond understanding. Nonetheless, that's my opinion. Seeing the clear trends that businesses will struggle in at least the next 18 months or so, what should companies be doing to ensure they stay afloat? I'd like to hear from you, Boon. What do you think?
Recovery, I think regardless of sectors, recovery could be a totally different business for some organization today, right? There'll be new business model that leverage disruptive technologies, but some norms will probably never return. So I think, to be honest, some companies will have little chance of survival, and that's a fact, right? They can't help because they're not ready for the long winter ahead that we mentioned. Metaphorically speaking, they have no food, they're unable to hibernate, to go without food, and no one the harder way to stay warm. So I think to survive, one must, or company, we must be able to find our new source of food, new source of income. It may not be the same kind of food that we are used to. Mm-hmm. It could or will likely taste different, I think. And so it's to adapt and eat whatever is available. It's not about masters and health, which is like margins and profit. It's about survival to get through this winter. Mm. So I think some examples that I noticed, I've been following all these companies that are changing, you know, like small fashion houses in the US, they pivoted to make fashionable masks, first to help, then to survive. Gucci's making masks, Dior's making hand sanitizers. Ford and GM are pivoted to produce ventilators and respirators. It's not easy for all of them. It's difficult to switch. But I think meanwhile, it's just to stay lean, declutter, and remove unnecessary costs.
Yes, no, you're quite right. And Malik, you're an entrepreneur as well. What's your advice on companies to ensure that they stay afloat?
So I've been through two crises. So I think I've always fought some of my more sometimes shareholders who want, you know, sort of to need to dividend out our profits and so on. I've always said to them, I always want at least 6 months worth of expenses in cash in the company, right? So I think applying that sort of basic principles, having cash or having at least credit lines intact. Or even increasing credit lines around this time. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I got 6 months cash, and I'm talking to bankers just to increase credit lines, right? So I think cash is king. And I think there's something that you learn from the Asian financial crisis, and something you learn from the GFC as well, is that you do need this. You do need this sort of. There's a lot of uncertainty. You need at least 6 months, and this one could be even longer. So I'm talking about. We talked about 18 months. So and your questions are perfect in the sense of asking people whether they can survive 6, 7, survive 18. And I think a minority who can survive 18. A lot of us cannot survive 18. So I think making sure that your credit lines are. You're talking to your bankers. We're talking to our bankers. To secure or increase those lines, that's important.
Well, Tim, you're in banking. Do let us know. Do you see any additional help from banks towards keeping companies afloat?
Well, the banks will be there to lend. In fact, particularly in Singapore, where the government has backstopped SMEs, it makes it easy. In fact, the banks are inundated with applications that they're trying to quickly process, get the cash out to SME owners. The Singapore government has really stepped in to provide a lifeline there. In terms of non-SMEs, the broader, I think banks will, by and large, want to stand with their customers, particularly the forward-looking banks. You know that old thing about banks lending you an umbrella when it's not raining, taking away when it does. Most bankers are too smart to know that that doesn't work, right? It's not a sustainable model. So by and large, banks will want to be there. I would like to actually point out one thing that I think people need to think about. It has to do with capital, right? So as long as your capital stock is not affected or depleted, once demand normalizes, you can resume production again, all right? A lot of people understand that from a hard asset point of view. I think what people have not really stopped to think about is actually every company possesses 4 forms of capital. Financial capital is just one of the 4, but most companies actually remain very rich in terms of human capital, which are the people, the talent that they've accumulated. And the second element is increasingly important today. It's called social capital, right? It's the whole customer ecosystem, the trust that you've built up around it. Of course, the last one of capital is natural capital, which we're all familiar with. That's the environmental piece. So my point is that even if companies have trouble staying afloat in terms of financial capital, they should begin to draw on the other forms of capital. Now, one example of that, if I had a small business and I had, say, 4 employees who were a really tight team, and I knew I had cash flow problems, could I go to my team members and basically say to them, would you guys be willing to invest? i.e., you might take a lower pay for the next 12 months, but hey guys, we're going to get through this. Let's reorganize ourselves. And when business comes back, we're going to spend our time innovating. When it comes back, we're going to spend our time building social capital, trust with customers. Once demand comes back, we're going to do a much stronger business. In a sense, what that business has done is they've taken what would be a traditional cash flow problem. They've looked at the other suppliers of capital and say, will you be willing, to seek capital into this business, because we think our competitors are going to go out of business. We're the last man standing, right? We're going to clean up when things recover. So I actually feel that companies need to look beyond just financial capital, think out of the box. The other point actually is with innovation today, right? So let's just say I run a restaurant and I have 4 really good chefs, right? I might say to the chefs, hey guys, I'll take a pay cut with all of you. Let's move to a cloud kitchen and let's leverage your talent and ability and let's leverage delivery platforms and we'll come out stronger from this. That's a concrete example of leveraging the other forms of capital to stay afloat during the season.
If I may add to Tim's point, I think even as companies, we need to, I mentioned earlier, right? You need to stay warm. When you stay warm in long winter, you need a community to keep you warm. So companies need to think of how to build the community to harder with, right? So form alliances and new ecosystems, you have to adapt and win. So it's not about margin anymore. It's not about, everybody get a full salary. You can share your network, and this applies to both large and small enterprises. The mentality is about keeping each other up, right? And that many will survive. Because if it's about me and myself, like what Tim said, they're going to suffer. And at the end of the day, we need everybody, help the upstream, help the downstream. Because as the saying goes, right? A single twig breaks and a bundle of twigs is strong. So I think, I think one point I always say, it's not the strongest that survive, right? If so, then T-Rex will be roaming the earth. It's really the most adaptive that survive. And that's why it's still sticking down these days, right? So I think it's an important point, adapt, work together and forget about those huge margin profits we're making, right? Just keep each other in a system so we can grow up together.
Yeah. No, I like that very much, the new definitions of assets and capital. I'm of course very hopeful. I hope there's light at the end of the tunnel. And you mentioned China when we first started the session, Tim. One of the first to relax restrictions has been China, as you all know. So on 30th March, China Daily reported that sales by key retailers had climbed to more than 30% on e-commerce platforms, according to the Ministry of Commerce. How do you think Asia could pave the way for new beginnings? Tim, maybe you'd like to take this.
Good question. I think there's a term for it. They call it revenge buying. My colleague in Shanghai sent me pictures of long queues outside the luxury boutiques once they once they relax the restrictions. But it's a great point. I would say three things, right? Number one, there's a large emerging middle class that prior to COVID-19 was on the verge of really coming out in full force, right? And that middle class is still there, right? Provided we don't get a systemic collapse in terms of capital stock as a result of COVID-19. And the way that middle class works effectively is you have a large number of people entering the workforce with new skills, new abilities, and the ability to earn higher incomes, all right? And that creates a virtuous circle. So the first thing is you've got a middle class that was there before COVID-19. Last I checked, they're all still alive and they'll be ready to go back to work and spend when COVID-19 is over. So that's the first thing. The second point, and actually I think COVID-19 has helped this. The second point is actually digital technology, right, has really advanced at such a pace that there are new ways to reach that middle class. There are new ways to service them, right? Mm-hmm. So if you just take education, for example, in the old days, everyone used to think to start an education institution, you need to have a building, you need to have 40 kids in a classroom and one teacher teaching them. I think that home-based learning is teaching educational providers to find new ways to be a lot more efficient. The other case in point is look at what we're doing here right now, right? We are having what typically would have happened in a hotel ballroom, getting people to travel. It's now happened seamlessly on Zoom, right? So there are whole new ways to restructure the value proposition leveraging technology, okay? So I think that the combination of the fact that the middle class is there and that digital technology offers new ways to serve and to access this middle class, therefore tells me that there's plenty of opportunity in Asia. We can bring these two pieces together. So to me, I think that's the real opportunity, you know, a burgeoning middle class and new ways to service them, leveraging technology, to me creates a fantastic opportunity for growth.
So as a technologist, Yabun, what do you think?
Well, definitely, we already can see all this technology. Actually, we talk about the new norm, you know, but a lot of these things has really been happening. It's really available technology-wise, right? It's just that the adoption is not as high. I think the adoption will definitely accelerate in terms of anything that can be digitally delivered, anything that can be done offsite, remotely. These things will definitely happen. When I was in the IBM 20 years ago, IBM, they paid me mobility allowance to work from home. So technology was available 20 years ago. Just that adoption is not high, and there are a lot of things involved in adoption. It's not about technology, it's about the whole organization, the processes. And I do feel that what Tim said is so true, that today, if the people talking to me about education, I'll tell them that, you know, you better start changing your content to be online first. We can't convert everything from physical to online. We need to design it the other way around, right? Online first, or in Tim's case, when mentioned about the F&B, if you want to play the game, you got to think of delivery first, all right? Things are different. It's not just you try to force a square peg into a round hole. You know, you need to design it for the round hole.
Malik, how do you think Asia could pave the way for tomorrow?
So I think two slightly separate points, but just to follow on from Boon, I think you know, all of us have seen, talking about digitalization first, and then I'll talk a little bit about how COVID-19 actually has exposed a raw nerve among some Asian economies and societies, right? So I'll start with digitalization first, and I think agree completely. I think we all seen the meme, you know, what has caused your company to adopt digitalization, and is it a CEO, CTO, or, you know, or COVID-19? And the answer is COVID-19, right? Changing people's habits was really, really hard. And coming from I guess, you know, like coming from the digital space, I think, you know, for example, FiLife, the company I founded just recently, what we try to do is try to essentially distribute insurance policy completely online. So basically, you can buy a life insurance policy within 10 minutes, right? $1 million policy at a certain rate and so on, but completely online. You know, so in a sense, we had a lot of pushback in terms of like, oh, will people adopt this? Will people do it on your own? But now I think what we now can do customer service, or we can do even a sales call just by video, right? Essentially, so persuading or consulting customers by video. We didn't, at first I thought, my gosh, I had a huge education program about how to do this, how to educate people to go on video, etc., to be able to do customer service by video. But now COVID-19 has done it for me, right? Has done it for our organization. I don't have to educate people about using Zoom anymore, which is fantastic. You know, it's wonderful. It's like, my gosh, my whole customer education problem has gone. And by the way, let's move it just a little bit more for them to buy insurance now. You know, to go on online and fill up their underwriting online. It's a smaller step than educating through the whole process. So I think it's a great thing. So we're completely going with that. On the other hand, I think what has happened is that I think as part of Asia, I don't think there's any geographic advantage to this, but I think a crisis like this exposes your raw nerves, exposes where you're weakest. In Singapore, it exposed certain reliance of 400,000 people I guess migrant workers who are based in dormitories in Singapore. That exposes like, wow, first people go 400,000. That's the first question, right? Wow, we have 400,000. The second question is, and they're in dormitories and they double time those dormitories, 12 hours kind of thing, you know, in a 24-hour period. In Malaysia, for example, we don't even know what was our raw nerve. We don't even know who these guys are, right? We don't even have a reliable count on number of migrant workers in Malaysia. We don't have a system for distributing funds to people, right? We don't have a system where we can say, all right, yeah, here's, Singapore has it, you know, but in Malaysia, here's, okay, we want to give you your 400 ringgit. How do we get that to you? We don't even know your bank account numbers, right? So one thing, this crisis actually expose weaknesses in companies, in economies, in societies, that I think it'd be a great, I feel energized in trying to resolve these things. If I were a government person, I'd be energized to resolve some of these issues. And if I were, and in companies like for example, like the radio station that I have, I'm energized to figure out, wow, we can now do, you know, we don't have just to talk on radio, we can do webinars, and not only that, or we have to create, you know, we were a bit stuck. We have to create backup stations, backup radio stations somewhere remotely, etc. If something like that happens, so we expose a nerve that now we're kind of energized to solve.
No, good to hear that. Good to hear that. And of course, you brought up digitization. You know, there's definitely a greater reliance on technology and communication tools to engage. Children are in online learning. We know that. Adults are sending files and communicating on Dropbox, Google Meet. The world will welcome a new norm post-pandemic. So what are your thoughts on the new norm? You know, how could leaders prepare for the future? Boon, maybe you could start with this.
Sure. I think there's some debate about should we use the word new norm or not, all right? I think if we use the word too often, it's no longer normal. I think after a while, the word new will drop and become normal. I think what we're trying to get everybody to understand is that things will not be the same again. But I felt that new norm is firstly, there'll be a smaller economy for sure for a while, all right? The economists call it a 90% economy, whereby some things would be, like for example, from the poll, right, discretionary spending will be dropped. So some of these markets will shrink. New norm is also a structural change in our consumer and worker behavior. So from all the Great Depression to the 2008 financial crisis, you know, all those implementation of short-term measures, they all turn into fundamental and social economical shift, right, that lasted for generations. So COVID-19 will accelerate some of these consumer trends, like what we mentioned earlier. But one thing is that once the critical mass is gained, this behavior will be embedded in our lives for years to come, for sure. The other part of it is really about businesses. The new norm is still a change in our business thinking. Certain planning methodologies, critical thinking process will change. What was like a good to have, like design thinking, innovation methodologies, could become mainstream thinking process because people are trying to adapt to a change, all right, that has not been experienced before. But also there'll be a change in executive mindsets. Organizational culture will need to adapt to the new world. So in my view, new norm is still a change in business model, business design. It probably be about getting a job done. And that's why leaders need to start preparing their organization to pivot for a new norm. The other thing is that I feel that because we are witnessing businesses, I mean, even when the market opens, right, the circuit breaker, lockdown, whatever you call it, reopen, we know that some businesses will no longer be there because there are change in the way people consume. And I think the need, I think the most important thing to remember is the truth is that needs may not have changed, right? But this, the fulfillment of these needs is what has been altered. So like what Tim said, right? Home-based learning, you know, online learning will be something normal. We still need to eat, be healthy, entertain. We need to communicate, work, learn, have business meetings. But we'll probably do it very differently from what was before COVID-19. So leaders need to understand their abilities and how to redesign, remodel to pivot for new norm.
No, I totally agree. They need to be more agile. Malik, what do you say about the new leadership?
So I think we need to be, I guess, yeah, what Boon says, completely new way of working. I think I'm lucky in the sense of we were born out of digital. So things like, for example, you know, this classic agile development style thing where you do a stand up at first thing in the morning and then you do a stand up in the afternoon to conclude things. We're doing that digitally, and that's it jives very well with our with working from home. Every 10 o'clock in the morning, we fire up our, we meet and we discuss what we need to do for the day, and then we catch up at the last thing. It's a very Boon, you'll be recognized as part of the design, so not design thinking, but part of the agile development type sprints and so on. So I think in a way we've been born in that, and we live that, we breathe that. And I think, but I think for more traditional companies, I think you need to kind of like figure out to adopt those kind of things, right? Basically, how do you maintain connection with employees who are working from home, etc. The other thing also, the other element also, I realized I had that. In fact, even this morning, I asked the team, would you go back to the office? We can go back to the office now in Malaysia. Would you go back to the office? And they said, actually, I would go back for the social, but if I want to do work, for some of them, actually, I rather do work at home. I'll go back for the social. Interesting. Why? Oh, because we can connect with each other, we can G up each other and things like that. But when I need to do really serious work, I need that quiet time. Our open plan office environment is difficult to concentrate, right? So that's a revelation, right? So maybe our work will be reversed. When we want to do real serious work, we stay at home, and then when we want to have that sort of rah-rah team meeting and get ourselves pumped up for certain things, we go to the office, right? So so it's that kind of like thinking is coming through, and I certainly know right now I'm meeting people, meeting face to face. I think I need that to build that trust and relationship in the beginning. But after that first meeting, I don't think I need to kind of like see them all the time, right? I can just present to them. I can present to them remotely, etc. So I think this will be a huge impact on business travel. I mean, I'm a member of the Harvard Business School Asia Pacific board, and I know these guys. We've been working as a board together for 2-3 years, and I don't need to go and see them again to build those relationships. I know them already. All I need to do is just maintain those relationships, and I will not be flying to 20 hours to US just to have a board meeting, right? So business travel, and I think follow the money, and you follow Buffett's money. He's saying Warren Buffett's money. He's saying, my gosh, he's out of the airline industry, and that's saying something. That's really saying something.
I know that hits a lot of people right in the guts. Tim, how could leaders prepare for the future?
Well, the first thing every leader needs to learn is a 7-word phrase, and this will be hard-coded in. Why must we do things this way? Right? And I think COVID-19, if it doesn't drive this home, every leader needs to first ask that question. And I think what I mean by that, take Malik's example of work from home. I'd be interested to know, if we could do a poll, it'd be interesting, how many of the bosses on this line are going to insist that workers come back to the office once the circuit breaker is lifted, right? Because that says a lot about your mindset. So I think that's the most important thing that I think all leaders need to ask is that, in my view, this is a once-in-a-century opportunity to reinvent the rules, right? This is a massive reset that comes along once in a century. And if you lose the opportunity to really galvanize your entire team to say, guys, let's ask this question, why must it be done this way? And let's rethink everything again. The other thing that I think is really important is actually something Yao Boon mentioned, which is design thinking, right? I think that leaders need to really grab a whole, map out the entire ecosystem around which the business operates. Ask two questions. Number one, which is the weakest link in this entire ecosystem, right? Because what COVID has shown is that one part of the ecosystem goes down, you're as strong as your weakest link.
Yes.
So number one, which is the weakest link? Figure out how do we fortify, how do we intervene, right? How do we strengthen that weak link? Then the second question is to ask, where are the pain points in the ecosystem, right? And what can we do as an organization to eliminate those pain points, leveraging the possibility offered by technology? So I think if leaders are able to A, ask the question, why must we do it this way? Secondly, go deep into your ecosystem and ask these two questions. I think you will be in a good position to seize this once in a 100-year opportunity to reposition your business.
Absolutely.
Yes. No, those are very, very valid points. And we're running out of time, but so just let me do a quick recap and we'll go on to a Q&A session. I would encourage everyone to start putting in their questions into the Q&A box. It's at your tool tabs at the bottom of your Zoom page. So just a quick recap. We know that there's some amount of time in which we have to live through or survive through, and we've talked about time frame. It could be anywhere between 6 to 18 months. We hope that it's going to be a U-shaped return, definitely not a W. And we agree that we may have to suffer more dire consequences if it's a W. We know that in order to survive, that new business models will have to be revised and reviewed and looked at. The banks today, yes, they're happy to help, but we need to also take stock of our other capital, which are financial, human, social, stroke ecosystems, and of course, national, which is the environment itself, natural, which is the environment itself. We agreed that if anything, we should be looking at new skills, and digital technology certainly has helped us relook at the skills we need to continue or even further develop. And the new norm would be about how we could develop agile thinking and asking ourselves tough questions around how do we reset ourselves and why must we do things this way? How do we change ourselves? How do we move forward from here? So let's move on to the Q&A session. I think we've got some questions coming up. Pui, thank you for your question. How do you see e-commerce, which is already fast growing and fast changing, evolve in the recovery phase? I understand you're in China, Pui. So panelists, perhaps we could start with Malik. How do you see e-commerce, which is already fast growing and fast changing, evolve in the recovery phase?
So I think it continues, it maybe accelerates for sure. I think suddenly things that you would not think of e-commerce before, you might think about, right? For example, you might not think about buying meat before on the e-commerce platform, but now you can. So new categories of things coming in. For sure, you had the previous categories, you know, the Lazadas in this part of the world. The Lazadas of the world offering the kind of like, you know, your fashion, your cosmetics, your things. But now you're talking about fresh produce. You're talking about new areas of e-commerce. So I think so e-commerce the breadth will increase, and maybe even, you know, to a certain extent the speed of it, the speed of everything, right? So I think that's a given.
Yes, Boon, perhaps you'd like to try. How do you think it'll evolve in the recovery phase?
For e-commerce, my personal example is that during the early stage of the whatever circuit breaker, and we're trying ordering things online, what used to be like 3 days became 3 weeks, right? And so I think e-commerce is very dependent on the auxiliary services, especially in logistics and distribution. So when we have that situation back then, there was a huge backlog after that when orders start coming on. And my take is that it's very dependent on the auxiliary services. In fact, the air travel is down. The air cargo, air freight, the price has gone up 3 times because just lack of airlines to fly those routes to carry goods. So it's very dependent, in my view, on the ability to distribute. That's why we identified that as a real potential opportunity for all this logistics and last mile effort.
Thank you. We've got a question from Fernando Gil de Barnaby. Which countries in the Asia Pacific region will rebound first and when? Tim, perhaps you could help with this question.
Yeah, so definitely North Asia has a better chance. So I say there are 2 things. I mean, one, the extent to which they've been able to manage the public health situation. The second is actually the extent to which they have large domestic economies, right? Because if they're very dependent on tourism or they're very dependent on global flows, that's going to take a long time because we don't know how long it would take for global travel to normalize. But so I think one country that comes to mind is China, right? China appears to have done a good job in terms of dealing with the COVID pandemic. The public health issue has been handled well. Secondly, they are an economy unto themselves, right? They are a huge domestic economy. And if anything else, this whole COVID thing will probably force them to look at more intra-country dependence and supply chains. Yes. So my sense is that these countries will probably be, and then the other North Asian countries, Korea, Taiwan. I mean, if the 3 countries traded with each other, that's really a large chunk of global demand.
Yes, yes. We have a third question from Badrinath Chalapa, who's in India. Do you think government fiscal stimulus is going to help recovery faster? Who would like to take this question? Perhaps you could start again, Tim.
Yeah, so I think that if you ask me, fiscal stimulus basically protects your capital stock, right? You basically don't want to see a situation where companies fold up and therefore workers get unemployed, businesses kind of, get dismantled, so that when demand picks up, you're not ready to leverage on that demand. So you don't want the supply chain to be, the capital and supply chain to be destroyed. That's what fiscal stimulus does. Now, having said that, the problem is that fiscal stimulus is a very blunt instrument. So for example, I mean, it's great that the Singapore government gave out this, GSS to all companies, but the reality is there's certain industries that are on the critical list in terms of capital destruction. There are other industries that frankly, it makes no difference to them. So I think that ultimately fiscal spending, fiscal support has to be a lot more targeted. And in a sense, the government needs to understand the ecosystem a lot better to know where to intervene. If anything, I hope this is a wake-up call for governments. Don't do everything with a broad brush. Understand the ecosystems that operate within your national economy. Understand where the vulnerabilities and pain points and intervene where it's most needed.
Yes. Malik, perhaps you could help, respond to this question from an entrepreneurial point of view.
For the government's fiscal stimulus?
Yes.
So I think, I think it's been helpful. I mean, it's been, I know for a lot of SMEs, particularly in Malaysia, where we also have a similar thing where they have a subsidy for every employed worker below a certain wage. There is that is a source of support for SMEs, but it's just really tough. It's not enough, and I think that's the tough part. I think a lot of SMEs in Malaysia are frankly looking at the issue of closing down. I mean, it's been a huge thing, and I think that's why that's what pressured, I guess, the return to normal, so-called normal, a bit earlier than scheduled. I think we went back to on the 4th of May. Most organizations went back to work, in spite of the fact that we're not fully over that. We're not fully confident that we're over that COVID-19 crisis yet. So I think people need to live, and I think that was a political decision, not a health decision necessarily. Good or bad, we'll have to find out. But I think the SME slash the informal sector really needed that.
Yeah. Boon, do you have anything to add to that?
I think most of the government are just trying to prop up the whole economy, right? So it's about making sure that they don't go bust. But I think the next wave, which is more difficult because they already spent so much on the first wave of defense, is to stimulate the economy to spend more, all right? And that part of it, I think not many countries can afford. From what I understood, there are like hundreds of countries already applying to IMF for help at the moment. So they're all trying to, it's like us queuing up at the supermarket, right? Trying to get in the line to get some money before IMF run out of money. So, but I think the next part is really how do you stimulate the economy to encourage spending again. You can prop the business up, but if nobody's spending, nobody's buying, the economy also will suffer a lot. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah. We'll take one last question from Tim Ringrose. What do the panelists think will be the burning platform that will encourage governments, all business leaders to think about the needs of a global community, given the lack of a coordinated international response to COVID-19?
Can I take that, Lilia?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think this is where I think the fact that you have AmCham here, AmCham members here, and I think it's, I must say from my viewpoint as an entrepreneur, just a simple entrepreneur here and so on, I think we've lacked American leadership completely in this area. If anything, the US leadership right now has been an obstruction to a lot of things. And I know, yes, you can point fingers and things like that, but again, this is the time to actually have a coordinated response. And the failure of American leadership in this area is going to last a long time. But the next time this happens, the next time the American government is elected, whoever is elected the next time, we're going to say, you know what, guys, this might be it for 4 years, right? But make sure, but the policies will change after 4 years, may change. And if they change, they're not a reliable partner anymore. So I think this is a message that AmCham needs to bring to your government and saying, look, your policies are creating this sort of short-term, not just people are hedging their bets with us simply because every 4 years they're afraid that policies will change, right? You pulling out of global agreements. I think that's really, really, I think very sad. I mean, the prosperity of this region came from American generosity. And you should be able to reap the benefit of this, and you're not right now. Right now, that all that years of American generosity and cooperation and so on is just falling by the wayside. And it just feels like, wow, if you're not, in certain ways, we're saying, look, if you're not going to join us, just get out of the way, right? Let the rest of the world do something about it.
Yeah. Boon, what do you think? Yeah. Thank you. Boon, what do you think what platform do you think will encourage governments and business leaders to think about the needs of the larger global community?
I don't have a good answer. I mean, if who can handle the situation, I cannot rally everybody together. If UN cannot do, I mean, UN has been very quiet actually. Yeah. I mean, if they can't do their job, which is exactly supposed to design for the purpose, I'm not so sure who can. I think maybe if China continue to drive the move forward, I don't think China's recovery is about benefiting Asia, all right? The entire world is dependent on China to come back. And China will be the next leader in leading us out of, first of all, economy, right? If they don't want anything else, all right? If you can feed us, all right, we'll be happy to be a partner. Then they'll be, and they choose to lead in a way whereby countries start to align with them, all right, in terms of what we can do together. Then we'll probably see a shift in how things are being done. I'm not so sure at that all those based out of Switzerland, be it UN, all those things, they can't do anything because too much of this democratic approach on both of what to do, what not to do. So, not sure.
Tim, do you have anything to add?
So the question was burning platforms.
Yes.
And I think there are two burning platforms that could galvanize action. I think the first is that if we saw a second wave, and actually we look at the Spanish flu, there was a second wave. Most of the people that died in the second wave.
Yes.
So I think if we get a second wave and the mortality, the mortality rates go up through the sky, that could actually galvanize a much smarter, more coordinated global response. The other thing potentially that could galvanize a coordinate is this idea of the second derivative in terms of the economy, right? If things weren't handled well and we started to see significant destruction in capital stock, and it appeared that we were on the verge not just of a short recession, but a global depression, that would also galvanize a global response. So I mean, these are the only two things I can see, and unfortunately, both are going to be very, very painful for everybody.
Yes, unfortunately, and we've also unfortunately run out of time, and I really want to be able to thank the panelists. I'm going to be sharing one last screen here so that everybody can connect with us if they need to. And these are the contact details for our panelists today. We do have a few words to share from Boone.
Yeah, we as a follow-up to this session, we're looking at running a webinar on the 20th of May to focus on how do we pivot as an organization in new norms. So for those who are keen to join us on the online forum, let us know. Email us so we can send an invite to you, and it'll be a discussion really about now there's a new norm. How are we going to do about it? All right, and how can company rearrange ourselves, remodel for the new norm?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I am going to stop the sharing here. LimLoges&Masters will continue with its series, its Future Ready series. Our next webinar under the Future Ready series is targeted at mental health and millennials. So that will be held on the 29th of May. Keep in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Stay connected on our LinkedIn at LimLoges&Masters. Thank you again to AmCham. The floor is yours, Li-Mei.
Great. Thank you, Timothy, Malik, Yabun, and of course, Lilia, for a very engaging discussion. As a small token of our appreciation for your time and effort, AmCham Singapore will be making a donation in your name to the AmCham Global Innovation Immersion Award at the Singapore Management University. Every year, the Chamber provides 6 scholarships to SMU students to pursue internships in the US during the summer, and it is our hope that the students gain meaningful work experience and skill development to come back to Singapore and become the future leaders of our economy. So thank you very much for your time.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, thank you everybody for dialing in today. It's been a pleasure having you.